Hey there, sleepy traveler. Come in. You've wandered far enough for one day, haven't you? Tonight, a god waits for you. Not one of thunder or war, no. This one walks barefoot through tombs, wraps kings in linen, and weighs hearts against a feather. His name is Anubis, and he has been waiting a very long time. So if you're still with me, thank you. Truly. There are 1,000 voices you could fall asleep to tonight, and you chose this one. That means more than you know. If you found some comfort here, in the quiet tread of old gods and drifting sands, we'd be honored if you stayed a while longer. Maybe even subscribed or tapped the like button, so these stories keep finding the people who need them. And if you're feeling awake enough to say hello, you can always whisper something in the comments. Maybe where in the world you're listening from, or what hour the night has brought you here. No pressure, just presence. There's incense curling from an unseen brazier, and something old, ancient even, is watching. But don't worry, he's not here to harm. He's here to guide. Settle into your blankets like linen wrappings. Let the dark cradle you like a tomb that isn't quite ready to close. You're not alone. Not really. We're descending into the myth of Anubis, Egypt's jackal-headed god of the dead. But don't let the title scare you. He's not the villain here, not the monster, not even the executioner. If anything, he's the one holding the flashlight while you walk through the crypt, the one keeping the monsters at bay. You see, Anubis didn't kill anyone. He just made sure you were dressed properly for the afterlife, that your heart was light enough to pass the test, that the linen folds were neat, that the canopic jars were labeled. A project manager, really, but with more eye makeup and teeth. He was the god who stood between chaos and ceremony, the one who smelled of resin and desert wind, of camphor and riverstone, the quiet patron of every priest who ever wrapped a corpse like a sacred gift. In the flickering torchlight of tombs, where gold gleamed against sandstone, he walked barefoot, silent, precise. But Anubis wasn't always so composed. Tonight, we'll trace him back beyond the painted walls and the scrolls, back to the time when jackals prowled the graveyards of forgotten kings, and the line between god and scavenger was only a matter of reverence. He is older than Osiris, older than Horus, older than most of the names carved in temple stone, and yet he was overshadowed, eventually, by political pantheons and mythic mergers, assigned new titles, filed under assistant deity. He didn't complain, he just adjusted the shroud and kept working. Tonight, as we follow the thread of his mythology, we'll wander through embalming rooms, peek into hidden crypts, and step softly through Duat, the winding labyrinth of the Egyptian underworld. We'll meet crocodile monsters and feather-hearted souls. We'll hear the story of how a jackal became a judge, and how that judge became a guardian. And maybe, just maybe, we'll understand a little more about what it means to let go, what it means to be held gently on the edge of life and what waits beyond. Now, let's dim the lights, and together, let's follow Anubis into the long corridor between memory and myth, somewhere out in the western desert, where the wind whistles through canyons of stone and the stars are so bright they seem to shiver. There walks a jackal. Not just any jackal, mind you. This one doesn't blink, he doesn't pant, he doesn't pause to sniff at bones or carcasses. He walks in a straight line, like he knows exactly where he's going. And he does, because this jackal has always known where the dead are buried. Before Anubis became Anubis, before the polished statues and the gold leaf coffins and the linen-wrapped hearts, he was a presence, a shape in the dusk. a silhouette on the horizon that farmers and mourners alike would see from a distance and whisper about. The jackals came first, always. They prowled the edges of early cemeteries, slinking between rock cairns and half-covered bodies, their black shapes gliding like shadows made flesh. And the living watched them, feared them, but also respected them, because the jackals never forgot where the bodies were buried. And so, in the earliest layers of Egypt's myth-making, long before pharaohs wore crowns or scribes carved spells on papyrus, there was already something sacred about the scavenger, something deeply uncomfortable, and yet divine. What better creature, after all, to guard the dead than the one who always returned to them? In the pre-dynastic years of Egypt, before even the Old Kingdom had drawn its first line in stone, burials were shallow. The desert was the coffin, the sand both cradle and grave. Bodies were buried curled in fetal position, their skins sun-darkened and pulled tight by the dry heat. No embalming, no wrapping, just the body, the sand, and the ever-watchful jackal. You can imagine the logic, can't you? You bury your grandmother in the desert. You leave her with some food, some pots, maybe a nice necklace she wore during festivals. You walk away, mourning. And a few nights later, you see the jackals. They've dug her back up, or maybe just sat beside her grave, howling. What do you do with that? Do you curse them? Do you chase them with a stick? No, you call them sacred, because that's how humans survive mystery. We mythologize it, we give it names, and soon enough, that jackal isn't just a nuisance. He's a messenger, a watcher, a god. Enter Wetwawet, an older jackal deity, sometimes shown as grey instead of black. His name means opener of the ways. He walked ahead of kings and armies, clearing paths, not just in the battlefield, but in the afterlife. Part psychopomp, part scout, part soldier god. In some ways, Anubis began as a shadow of Wetwawet, or maybe a sibling, or a rival, or just a better marketed brand of jackal god. But while Wetwawet opened the way, Anubis stayed behind to tend the dead. To understand how Anubis rose from desert scavenger to god of the embalming chamber, you have to understand one thing. Even the afterlife had a power struggle. Ancient Egypt didn't start with a fixed pantheon. It evolved like a slow-burning drama. Gods were added, merged, edited, rebranded. Anubis was there early. He had tenure. He was once the god of the dead, the one you called on when someone stopped breathing. Then came Osiris. Osiris had a gripping narrative arc. A just king, betrayed by his brother Set, chopped into pieces, resurrected by Isis, and made ruler of the afterlife. It was poetic. It was mythically elegant. It was popular. And suddenly, Anubis was no longer top jackal. But he wasn't cast out. He was repositioned. Osiris would now reign in the afterlife. And Anubis, he would prepare you to meet him. It wasn't a demotion, exactly. More like upper middle management. And it's important to note, when Osiris died, it was Anubis who embalmed him, who gathered the pieces, who wrapped him in sacred linen, who performed the first mummification. The myth gives him credit, a quiet acknowledgement, as if to say, he's not the king, but he's the one who makes the king immortal. Now we enter the embalming room. It is dim, still, filled with the scent of resins and death. A priest in a jackal mask stands over the dead, moving slowly, carefully, not out of fear, but reverence. The process begins with purification. The body is bathed in water and palm wine. Then comes the incision, a small cut along the left flank. The organs are removed and preserved, each one tucked into a canopic jar, labeled, blessed, and sealed, except the brain. That's removed through the nose with a hook. No preservation, no fanfare. Why? Because the Egyptians didn't believe it mattered. The brain was just stuffing. It didn't do anything. Your heart, though, that stayed. That was your soul, your memories, your moral compass. Unless it was removed by accident, in which case they'd pop in a backup heart, usually a scarab beetle amulet. You know, just in case the afterlife had a dress code. The body was then covered in natron, a natural salt, for 40 days, not 39, not 41. Anubis liked punctuality. And after that, the wrapping, linen strips soaked in oil, tied, layered, blessed, smoothed. Fingers individually bound, toes too. Amulets slipped between folds. Over the chest, the tiet, the knot of Isis. When all was done, the priest would step back, nod once, and whisper a final spell. The body was ready, eternal, beautiful. Let's return now to that quiet room, where the air is heavy with incense, and the only sound is the faint crackle of burning resin, and the whisper of linen being unrolled. The embalmer is here again, but he is not a man, not entirely. He wears the face of Anubis, a jackal's snout, long and serene, eyes rimmed with coal-black outlines, ears tall, stiff, alert. It is a mask, yes, but it is also a transformation. To wear the face of Anubis was not simply costume. It was embodiment. It was surrender. Because when the priest donned the jackal's visage, he ceased to be a man preparing a corpse. He became the god performing a rite. These masks were made of wood, often blackened and polished to a dull sheen. They were tied tightly, worn during the most sacred of steps, the anointing of the body, the speaking of the final spells, the sealing of the wrappings. There was something theatrical about it, yes, but also something deeply reverent. Egyptian funerary ritual wasn't performance for the living, it was performance for the dead. You didn't need an audience, you just needed the gods to be watching. And Anubis always watched. So the priests gave him hands, they gave him voices, they gave him presence, they wore his face and whispered his words. And the dead, wrapped in their fragrant shrouds, listened, or dreamed, or waited. Let's talk about the tools, because make no mistake, Anubis was not just a god, he was a craftsman, and craftsmen always have their tools. The embalming toolkit was both practical and mystical. You had the brain hook, a long, slender, somewhat terrifying implement used to scramble and extract the brain through the nostrils. You had flint blades, sharp enough to slice human flesh clean, but symbolically important too. Flint was old magic, prehistoric magic. You had natron, a natural desiccant, sacred in itself, dried from salty lake beds and prized like powdered gold. You had ceramic canopic jars, each guarded by one of the four sons of Horus. Imziti, human-headed, protected the liver. Hapi, baboon-headed, guarded the lungs. Duamutef, jackal-headed, watched over the stomach. Kebe-senwef, falcon-headed, kept the intestines safe. It's like a divine Tupperware set, but more judgmental. Then there were the spells, spoken aloud, carved into amulets, scribbled on linen strips, inscribed on the inside of sarcophagi. like secret cheat codes for the underworld. Anubis didn't just watch, he orchestrated. Every tool, every phrase, every motion was believed to echo the original rite, the moment when he prepared Osiris himself for the next world. And by repeating it, you were keeping the story alive, keeping yourself alive. Because eternity in Egypt didn't begin at death, it began at preparation. We don't know their names, not most of them anyway, but there were hundreds, thousands of priests who served as the hands of Anubis. They were called Wab priests, the purified ones. Their role wasn't glamorous, it wasn't loud, it was quiet, careful, required complete ritual purity. They fasted, they abstained, they lived apart from others while performing their duties, not unlike monks, but with more linen and probably more salt. Some were chief embalmers, overseeing the entire mummification process. They coordinated teams, managed temple schedules, and conducted the opening of the mouth ceremony. Ah yes, that. The opening of the mouth was a ritual performed at the end of the burial rites, meant to magically restore the senses of the deceased. Sight, breath, speech, hearing, taste. A chisel or blade would be gently touched to the mouth, eyes, ears. And with each contact, the priest spoke spells. Imagine Anubis, hands steady, voice low, touching the lips of a newly wrapped king, giving them back their voice, giving them back their breath, so they could speak truth when their soul faced judgment. The embalming wasn't done just anywhere. There were specific places called wabet, or pure houses, sacred structures near temples, often beside the Nile. The body would be brought here under cover of night. No grand procession, no horns, just quiet. It would remain there for the full process. 40 days of drying, 15 of wrapping, all under the watchful eye of Anubis and his priests. Some bodies were treated quickly, others were prepared with painstaking care, especially royalty. In one famous case, the embalming of Pharaoh Seti took more than 2 months. Every finger perfectly wrapped, every charm precisely placed. Anubis, after all, did not rush his work. He had time, and so did the dead. The moment you die in ancient Egypt, things don't go black. Not exactly. Instead, your soul, your ba, rises like a bird. And your ka, your life force, lingers behind. Together, they begin a journey. Not into fire, not into clouds, but into a place called Duat, the underworld. But don't picture a cave or a pit. Picture a dream, a hallucinatory landscape of rivers and gates, stars that sing, and fields that grow upside down. Duat isn't hell. It isn't even punishment. It's process. Just like everything else in Egypt's relationship with death. You see, the Egyptians didn't believe dying made you perfect. You had to prove you deserved eternity, and that meant navigating this shadowy place. You'd face gates and guardians and questions you had to answer. But the most important moment, the moment, was still ahead. A chamber, a feather, and a jackal. At the heart of Duat lies a great chamber, silent, luminous, carved with stars and scales and symbols so old, even the gods read them slowly. This is the Hall of Two Truths. And here waits Anubis. He's not wearing his embalming tools now. He's not holding linen or oil. He's still, dignified. He stands beside a massive set of scales. One pan for your heart, one pan for a feather. Not just any feather, the feather of Maat, goddess of balance, order, and truth. It is impossibly light, almost insubstantial. It shivers in the air like it's made of principle, not plumage. This is the test. Not how many gods you worshipped, not how much gold you gave, but how true you were. If your heart is light, if you lived without cruelty, without arrogance, without injustice, it balances. If not, there is no retry button, no appeal process, because sitting beside the scales is Amit. Amit is what happens when someone says, "What if we combined a crocodile, a lion, and a hippopotamus into one terrifying death beast? Her name means she who devours the dead," which is clear enough branding. She is not evil. She is not a villain. She is consequence. If your heart is too heavy, laden with guilt, lies, or unresolved Yelp reviews, you don't get punished. You get eaten. That's it. No afterlife. No ghost story. Just erased. Digested. Unmade. It's not cruelty. It's cosmic composting. And Anubis? He doesn't flinch. He doesn't cheer. He just reads the result. He's not there to forgive or condemn. He's there to ensure the truth is known. Now Anubis isn't alone in the hall of two truths. To his side stands Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. He holds a stylus and a scroll, and as your heart is weighed, he records the outcome. You passed, he notes it. You failed, he notes that too. This is not bureaucracy. This is sacred record keeping. Because in Egypt, even gods file paperwork. Around the hall stand 42 assessors, minor deities who each ask you to swear you didn't commit a specific sin. I did not steal. I did not lie. I did not cause unnecessary suffering. Each answer is a small truth, a test of memory and integrity, but the scales remain supreme. Anubis waits, and when the heart settles, he simply nods. The verdict is clear. Let's say you pass. Your heart balances. The feather does not tremble. Amit turns away, disappointed but patient. Anubis gestures. The gates open. And now, finally, you may enter the field of reeds. It's peaceful there. A mirror of Egypt, but better. More fertile. More serene. No taxes. You reunite with your loved ones. You tend your fields. You fish the rivers. You become part of eternity. And Anubis, he does not follow. His work is done. He returns to the hall, to the next soul, to the next heart, to the next feather, quietly, always watching. If Egyptian mythology had a drama department, Osiris would be the lead actor. He dies tragically. He's chopped into pieces. He's stitched back together. He rules the underworld with dignity and a really impressive beard. People loved him. Osiris became the symbol of renewal, of life after death, of kingship beyond the grave. And the more popular he grew, the more temples were built, the more priests wrote scrolls in his name, the more his mythology bloomed. And Anubis, he stepped back, not because he was weaker, not because he was forgotten, but because Anubis didn't need the spotlight. He wasn't about worship. He was about function. Osiris sat on the throne, but Anubis ran the underworld like a quiet operations manager. He didn't need applause. He needed precision, and yet he noticed the shift. As Osiris became the lord of the afterlife, Anubis took on new names. They called him he who is in the place of embalming, which, while accurate, is a little like giving the god of sacred death rights the job title of corpse technician. Still, he wore it with grace. He also became known as foremost of the Westerners, which sounds like an ancient cowboy movie, but in context refers to those who dwell beyond the Nile, where the sun sets and the dead rest. Anubis became more niche, more specialized, not the god of death, but the god of correct death, the embalmer, the protector of tombs, the patron of mummification. He wasn't forgotten, he was repurposed, because that's what gods do when cultures evolve. They adapt. Centuries later, the Greeks and Romans arrived. And as they often did, they took one look at the Egyptian pantheon and said, let's remix this. Zeus became a moon, Thoth became Hermes, and Anubis, he was paired with Hermes too, because apparently both had experienced guiding souls. The result? Hermanubis. Yes, that is a real name. And yes, it sounds like your neighbor who owns a boat and wears sandals year-round. Hermanubis was a hybrid deity, a blend of Egyptian jackal mysticism and Greek travel-based psychopumping. He appears on coins, in magical texts, and in temple inscriptions well into the Roman period. And while he lost some of his original gravitas, he gained longevity. Because when a god can speak Latin and still scare grave robbers, he tends to stick around. Speaking of grave robbers, one of Anubis's lesser-known jobs was scaring the linen off would-be thieves. He wasn't just a funeral deity, he was a tomb guardian. Statues of Anubis were placed at the entrances of tombs, often reclining jackals staring straight ahead. Sometimes they were made of wood, painted black. Sometimes they were gilded, but they were always watching. And while the actual effect on robbers was probably mixed, let's be honest, greed beats superstition sometimes. The intention was clear. Anubis doesn't just prepare the dead, he protects them, even in silence, even in shadow, especially in shadow. Despite the political restructuring of the pantheon, Anubis endured. Why? Because he was necessary. Death didn't go out of fashion, and neither did the rituals surrounding it. Embalming remained sacred. Funerals remained elaborate. Hearts still had to be weighed. Anubis didn't need a cult or a mega-temple. He lived in the margins, in the hands of priests, in the flicker of torchlight over linen. And slowly, quietly, he became immortal, not through power, but through reliability. The god who never flinched, who never failed, who never stopped working. Even when the rest of the gods had left the building, gods are usually bound by borders. They rise where they're worshipped. They fade when the prayers stop. But not Anubis. He was quiet enough, patient enough, practical enough, that he slipped through the cracks. No temple tourism campaign, no plague of locusts or fire from the sky, just the same old work ethic. Weigh the heart, wrap the body, watch the tomb. And so, while the empires changed, from pyramid builders to sand-blown dynasties, to Romans in linen skirts and British archaeologists in pith helmets, Anubis stayed, not loud, not celebrated, but there, always, always there. The 19th and 20th centuries brought a new kind of revival for the gods of Egypt. Archaeologists began opening tombs like they were time capsules, and in many of them, reclining jackals were waiting. One of the most iconic was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, a sleek black wooden statue of Anubis lying in alert repose, watching the entrance like a divine bouncer, eyes inlaid with gold, ears pricked forward, a sentinel across centuries. And while the Western world fell head over heels for the drama of mummies and curses, Anubis didn't play along. He wasn't the mummy. He was the one who wrapped the mummy, filed the paperwork, and lit the exit signs in the afterlife. Not scary, not monstrous, just methodical. He didn't chase you. He waited for you to arrive. Fast forward. You've seen him, even if you didn't know his name. He shows up in movies, in video games, on t-shirts, tarot decks, and Halloween costumes. Usually tall, dark, and handsome. If you're into divine morticians with jackal heads and authority issues. In The Mummy Returns, he commands armies. In Yu-Gi-Oh, he's a shadowy force of judgment. In Assassin's Creed, Origins, he looms in the duat as a regal power. Every version tweaks him, of course. Some make him cruel, some make him savage, but they always make him cool. Because there's something magnetic about a god who doesn't punish, just processes. No drama, no lectures. Just, let's weigh that heart and see where you stand. Outside of fiction, Anubis has a different kind of fan base. He appears in tattoos, black ink jackals curled around forearms, shoulders, backs. In altars, candles, incense. Tiny statues on nightstands or bookshelves. In online forums where people talk about death, grief, and protection, Anubis shows up again. Not as a dog-headed cartoon, but as a symbol of transition, of peace, of dignity in the face of endings. People pray to him, not for miracles, but for closure, for strength, for a gentle hand when things fall apart. Anubis doesn't fix things. He holds space. And in a world that so often rushes past grief, that kind of stillness is revolutionary. So let's ask the obvious question. Why Anubis? Why did this god survive when so many others faded into trivia? Maybe because Anubis was never about dominance. He didn't hurl lightning or demand worship. He just did the work, quietly, precisely, eternally. He is death as service, as honor, as continuity. In life, we prepare for beginnings. We mark firsts, first breath, first word, first love. But Anubis reminds us that endings matter, too. That being cared for after you're gone, having someone to guide you, wrap you, protect your story, is sacred. Maybe that's why he still resonates. Because in a world where so much feels temporary, he is the god of final acts done right. And maybe tonight, as you drift between waking and sleep, you'll feel that presence. Not frightening, not cold, just someone walking beside you. Through the dark, torch in hand, feather in pocket, ready when the time comes to help you find your way home. And now, we've come full circle. The embalming room is empty. The linen has been folded. The incense has burned low. Anubis is gone. Or maybe he's just stepped back into the shadows where he's always been, watching, waiting, not for praise, not for fear, just for the next soul who needs him. We've walked with him through myth and memory. We've seen him as jackal and priest, as guide and guardian, as the god who touches death not with terror, but with care. He did not judge loudly. He did not demand offerings. He simply made sure no one crossed the threshold alone. And perhaps that's why we still whisper his name in the dark even now. So, sleepy traveler, thank you for staying until the end. There are thousands of stories out there. You chose to hear this one. You gave it your time, your stillness, your breath. Now let the night hold you. Let the stillness settle. The feather is balanced. The scales are quiet, and the jackal has already moved on, somewhere out beyond the dunes, where the stars are sharp and the silence is sacred. Sleep well. We'll see you again soon.